They thought it was just a game. A group of 6th grade students at a school in Puebla City, Mexico, kids no older than 11, gathered in a quiet corner of the classroom one afternoon and brought out a Ouija board. It wasn't store-bought or made of polished wood. It looked handmade, drawn on paper, letters smudged from eager fingers. According to school reports and later local news coverage, the children said they wanted to contact a classmate who had recently passed away. They whispered his name, spelling it out letter by letter, laughing nervously when the planchette began to move. Some thought it was a prank. Others swore they felt it shift on its own. That was the last moment any of it felt fun. Within minutes, one of the girls began to hyperventilate. She stumbled backward, knocking over a desk, then collapsed to the floor. Another followed, eyes wide and unblinking, shaking uncontrollably. Then a third, all of them within minutes of each other. Teachers assumed it was some kind of panic attack, maybe heat exhaustion or stress from group hysteria. But then it spread. Other children complained of dizziness and chest pressure. One boy said it felt like someone was sitting on his shoulders, even though no one was touching him. By the time the school nurse arrived, chaos had erupted. Parents were called in a frenzy. One mother, upon seeing her daughter pale and unresponsive on the ground, fainted on the spot. What started as a dare and innocent attempt to connect with someone they missed turned into a public health emergency. Paramedics arrived, followed by a local news crew. Though the children were eventually stabilized and released, the school was shaken. No physical cause could be identified for the collapses. The students hadn't eaten anything strange, and the room showed no signs of gas leaks or toxins. Some whispered that the kids hadn't been pretending, that they had seen something. One child said he saw their friend's face in the reflection of the classroom window, mouth open as if screaming, though no sound came out. Another swore that the planchette kept moving on its own, even after they all let go. The incident caught national attention. Conservative groups blamed supernatural exposure. Skeptics called it mass hysteria. But either way, the school responded quickly. They began hosting parent meetings to warn about the dangers of spiritual games. Teachers were trained to intervene early in any similar future cases. The makeshift Ouija board was confiscated and burned. Still, the memory lingered. Some of the students refused to return to the same classroom. A few transferred out entirely. Even months later, one child reported nightmares in which he heard the classroom, chair legs screeching across the floor on their own at night. He said someone kept spelling his name out over and over while everyone else slept. To this day, no one has fully explained what happened inside that room, but the children remember, and they don't call it a game anymore. Ask ChatGPT. In the quiet suburbs of Maryland in 1949, an anonymous 14-year-old boy, later given the pseudonym Robbie Mannheim, became the center of one of the most infamous supernatural cases in American history. It began innocently enough with the Ouija board. Robbie had been very close to his Aunt Harriet, a spiritualist who introduced him to the board as a way to pass the time and supposedly to communicate with spirits. When she died unexpectedly, Robbie was devastated. In his grief, he began to use the board more frequently, allegedly trying to contact her. But what answered wasn't his aunt, and it didn't leave. Shortly after Harriet's death, strange things began happening around the house. The family heard scratching coming from the walls, as if rats were inside, but pest control found nothing. Furniture began to move on its own. Objects flew across rooms without explanation. One night, Robbie's bed started shaking violently with him in it. His parents, terrified and unable to explain what they were witnessing, turned to their Lutheran pastor. But when prayers didn't help and the disturbances grew more intense, the family sought help from the Catholic Church. Enter Father Raymond J. Bishop and Father William Bowden, two Jesuit priests who would become central figures in what is now considered one of the most thoroughly documented exorcism cases in modern history. After observing Robbie and witnessing bizarre behavior, violent outbursts, speaking in guttural voices, Latin phrases emerging from a boy who barely understood English grammar, they concluded that an exorcism was necessary. The priests noted that when sacred objects were brought near him, Robbie would thrash and growl. Words like hell and evil began appearing scratched into his skin, sometimes forming spontaneously in front of witnesses. Over the next several weeks, the priests performed a series of exorcism rituals on Robbie, first at his home, then later at the Georgetown University Hospital and a religious facility in St. Louis. Witnesses reported seeing the boy levitate, scream in multiple voices, and speak in languages he had never studied. He would become impossibly strong, throwing grown men across the room and breaking out of restraints. The sessions were grueling, and not all priests present remained involved. Some left, deeply disturbed by what they saw. Eventually, after a particularly violent episode in which Robbie screamed for hours and claimed to see a serpent rising from the floor, the final ritual was performed. During the climax, he allegedly cried out that a figure of Saint Michael had appeared and commanded the demon to leave. After this, Robbie fell unconscious, and when he awoke, the change was immediate. The growling stopped. The marks on his body faded, and for the first time in months, he was calm. Robbie and his family never spoke publicly about what happened. He went on to live a quiet life with no further signs of possession or psychological illness. But the priests involved, especially Father Bishop, documented everything. Their notes eventually made their way to author William Peter Blatty, who used them as the basis for his 1971 novel, The Exorcist, which was later adapted into the legendary 1973 film. Though the book changed a possessed child's gender and other key details, the core events, the use of a Ouija board, the escalating supernatural attacks, the harrowing exorcism were all pulled from real accounts. To this day, the case of Robbie Mannheim remains one of the most chilling examples of spiritual intrusion ever recorded. Not just because of the physical phenomena, but because of the number of reputable witnesses, priests, nurses, and doctors who all swore that what they saw defied logic. Whether you believe it was a genuine demonic possession or the tragic result of psychological trauma, there's no denying that something beyond comprehension took place in that small Maryland home, something dark enough to haunt American culture for generations. In 1991, in the Vallecas district of Madrid, Spain, a 16-year-old girl named Estefania Gutierrez Lazaro sat down with a group of classmates during lunch break and pulled out a Ouija board. They had snuck it into school in an attempt to contact the deceased boyfriend of one of the girls, hoping for some kind of message or sign. But the session took a terrifying turn when a teacher caught them mid-ritual and broke the board in half. According to witnesses, a strange smoke rose from the broken pieces and drifted toward Estefania's face, entering her nose and mouth. From that moment on, her life and the lives of those around her would never be the same. In the weeks that followed, Estefania began experiencing horrifying symptoms. She suffered from seizures and violent hallucinations, often claiming to see shadowy figures at night or voices whispering threats into her ears. Her family reported that she would wake up screaming, eyes wide with fear, insisting that dark shapes were gathering in her room. At school, she would zone out, lose consciousness, or become aggressive without warning. Doctors ran multiple tests, but no medical explanation could be found. Her mental and physical health deteriorated rapidly. Then, just 6 months after the seance, Estefania died suddenly in her bedroom. No official cause of death was determined. Her body simply shut down. But the horror didn't end there. In the aftermath of her death, Estefania's family began to experience terrifying phenomena inside their apartment. Crosses on the wall turned upside down, strange banging noises echoed from empty rooms, and cold spots appeared in hallways that were otherwise sealed. The family claimed to see shadow figures, watching them from the corners of the house tall, dark outlines with no visible features. One night, Estefania's mother reported waking to find her husband levitating several inches off the bed. Their younger children screamed about being touched and spoken to by a girl they described as looking just like Estefania. Their dog refused to enter certain rooms. The terror escalated to the point where the family contacted the police, not for a break-in, but for a haunting. When law enforcement arrived at the Vallecas apartment, they didn't dismiss the reports as hysteria. According to the official police report, one of the few in Spain's history to document supernatural events, the officers themselves experienced unexplained activity. They witnessed a heavy wooden cabinet door swing open violently on its own, loud bangs coming from the walls with no source, and an invisible force shoving objects to the floor. One officer later said he felt something breathing down his neck while standing in Estefania's room. Others refused to re-enter the home altogether. These first-hand encounters by trained officers gave the case a chilling level of credibility that even skeptics struggled to explain. The story would go on to inspire the 2017 Spanish horror film, Veronica, which dramatized the events of the Vallecas case but retained many disturbing truths. The seance, the hallucinations, the unexplained death, the haunted apartment, it all stemmed from what began as a teenage experiment with something none of them fully understood. Estefania's parents never moved out of the apartment. They continued to experience phenomena for years, though less frequently as time passed. Her mother still insists to this day that her daughter was attacked by something they summoned that day, something that never fully left.